Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for logging on for today's education with Mr. Jeff Simonds, General Manager and Senior Director of Operations at the fantastic Bandon Dunes Resort, based in Bandon, Oregon. Jeff is a longtime member of the Pacific Northwest PGA, with us as a member since 2006. He is a four-time Pacific Northwest PGA Section Award winner, helps lead our mentoring committee for Oregon with a passion for helping his fellow professionals succeed. He's an amazing golf executive and a great player. Joined with him today is Mr. Bodo Sieber, CEO of Golf Course Optimization and Pace of Play Management System, Tag Marshall. The title of our webinar today is How Bandon Dunes Creates Exceptional Player Experience While Optimizing Efficiency, and is sponsored by Tag Marshall.
Thank you, Denise, and thanks for you and the team have been great partners to us, and we're excited about 2023 with you guys. The big question is, does Jeff get credits for being on the webinar?
Well, we'll see.
No, only joking. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm great, thanks, Bodo.
Super excited to have you on. Of course, everybody knows Bandon Dunes. I think we should have added a poll with two questions: who's played at Bandon, and for those of you who haven't, who wants to, and we get 100% agree on both, or certainly in aggregate. Jeff, before we get started, or as we get started, I'd love for you to do an introduction to your amazing resort, and thank you for the what you're doing for the game. Really, I mean, I'm sure you'll touch on it, but I have not met a single person who has been to Bandon and doesn't rave or want to come back, right? And that's all the way from Scotland to Canada to New York. So anyone who's been wants to go back, and but the excellence that you guys provide doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design, and you are one of those engineers. So please, Jeff, take it away, and also please do tell us how you got to be in the seat that you're in now at Bandon Dunes.
Yeah, thank you, Bodo. I'll just try to make it a real quick conversation or update, but essentially, Bandon Dunes Golf Resorts located on the Southern Oregon coast. We've got 5 18-hole championship golf courses and a 13-hole par 3 golf course. We started or opened in 1999 with Bandon Dunes, and have had golf courses every couple of years, all the way up to 2020 when we added Sheep Ranch. So it's been a kind of a slow growth, or at least it feels slow growth for us here, but in the golf world and the golf landscape, it's been pretty quick. I joined the Bandon Dunes team back in 2004, coming from Boise, Idaho, and certainly was very fortunate that when I chose golf as my career path, I tried to look for something that would be different and unique and challenging, and found my way to Bandon Dunes. And I've been so fortunate that as my own personal career growth has happened, Bandon Dunes has continued to expand and evolve. And so I've been able to kind of grow my career at the same time with Bandon Dunes. And, it starts at the top. Our owners, the Kaiser family, are just absolutely tremendous golf developers, business people, but also just understanding what golfers want in their golf experience. And so, we're able to kind of deliver on the vision that Mike Kaiser had. And, we keep that kind of as our mantra of what we're trying to do every day is, provide a trip of a lifetime. So that's kind of woven into our DNA, and we're excited. A lot of growth still happening. We've got a new restaurant getting ready to open up next year. We're going to start working on a new par 3 golf course next year, and then hopefully real soon another 18-hole golf course. So we're not finished yet here in Southern Oregon.
Fantastic. And you mentioned it's quite a journey, that Bandon Dunes story, and many would have called Mr. Kaiser crazy when he said let's go build a golf course in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, every single person did. So thankfully he didn't mind hearing that's crazy. He did it anyway, and we're also lucky that he did.
Yeah, no, for sure. And your most recent addition that made headlines at a time that we all needed positive headlines was a sheep ranch that was launched in 2020, where we all have such short memories, and to some of us it feels a lifetime ago. That's when COVID was the rave and hit us first. And this was the one bit of good news in golf. In what month was it that you officially opened? Was it June or May? I can't recall.
We opened Sheep Ranch in June, and
yeah,
it's nice because 2020 for us goes down as a fantastic year. Just opening up Sheep Ranch, we hosted the 120th U.S. Amateur Championship. But there was a time there in the early part of the year when we shut down for the first time ever in our 22-year history, that trying to figure out what was going on, and we're a little nervous that maybe opening up Sheep Ranch wasn't going to happen. But we're thrilled we were able to, and that golf in Oregon kept being played and never stopped. So we were able to execute.
Yeah, and well done on that. Thanks for that bit of great news and adding another wonderful golf course to not only Oregon, but the globe. I think we all have in the industry obviously tremendously benefited from the fact that we got so much additional play and so many new players joining. And I'm very certain that for those who are starting to take it a little bit seriously, Bandon Dunes is on their bucket list somewhere. Jeff, thank you so much for the introduction. If you'll allow me just a brief introduction on Tag Marshall. My name is Boris Hieber. As you can hear, I'm not from Oregon, neither am I from Atlanta, where our US headquarters are. I am born and raised German. So I'm very methodical and don't have a sense of humor. What we do with Tag Marshall is we provide a golf course optimization system, really looking to optimize what happens out on the golf course, both from a player experience, but also from an efficiencies and ultimately a revenue standpoint too. We're very fortunate to work with some of the very best, including obviously Bandon Dunes, and also some top tier private clubs like Baltusrol or Oakmont. It's really quite a list now, but most of our clubs are $40-50 green fee courses, or just a good, decent private club from down the road. And they're all solving the same problem, right? They all want to provide the best possible player experience, do it in an efficient way, and make sure that it makes business sense to them. We also work with the European Tour, now called DP World Tour, and the USGA and the RNA. I'm mentioning this because obviously Bandon has got the USGA affiliation, having hosted fantastic events. So that's some of our work as well. And we're just looking to add value where we can, and building strong partnerships, including with the fantastic team at Bandon, but also the guys at the Northwest PGA section, to name a few. Okay, well, let's get started. And what I'd like to do, seeing that we've got such a nice crowd today, is throw a poll at everyone. What are the top key experience factors according to research? And because you are all entitled to your opinion, I would love to ask you, let me find this poll. What do you feel are the top three? Where's my polls? Here we go. So you can pick three here in this poll, and you would, if you wouldn't mind. So the options are course design, conditioning, clubhouse and amenities, pace and flow of play, playing partners, who's in my group, accessibility, tee times availability, cost and value. What do you feel, if you had to pick three, these three make a round of golf great, or they can break it if it's not done well? And while you guys frantically push buttons, I'd love to ask Jeff, what would you say? What rises to the top for you, and also obviously for your players that come through to Bandon, and also your team? What guides you guys?
Well, I'm glad you asked me, because I instantly went to try and go vote, and I noticed in the bottom corner it doesn't allow me to vote. So, looking at this list, I would say each of these factors is important. It goes into kind of that golf experience. For me personally, as I look at this, I look at the playing partners, who's in my group. That's an important thing. The course design and kind of course conditioning, I would kind of put those side by side. and then the pace of flow of play. And, I basically kind of break it down to, I want to play with who I want, where I want, when I want, and really kind of make that golf experience be that social and emotional golf experience rather than, something I'm just doing for exercise or doing for, checking a box. So.
That's
where
I love how you really have the player's perspective at heart here. And I think that also shows in the work that you do at Bandon, right? Because if it's right for the players, then it's right for your customers, obviously. I'm going to share the results here. So what our guests have voted is course conditioning and pace and flow of play as top, followed by a tie between course design and cost and value. It's obviously hard to not hit course design if you have a picture of one of the Bandon Dunes courses in the background. Which one is it, Jeff?
That's Pacific Dunes number 13 you've got right there.
That's Pacific Dunes. Okay. Amazing. Okay, that was great. So we've got top 2 course conditioning, pace and flow of play, and then cost and value / course design and next. I would argue that if you have great course conditioning and if you have good flow of play, that's already value, right? And sometimes $40 is great value, and sometimes $600 is great value. But that's what you have to get right. But let's look at what the research says. So you're obviously all experts, and thank you for your votes. So 82% of players have, according to the USGA, are voting course conditioning as top factor. So that is a top factor. And in the US, the most clubs would spend anywhere between $500,000 and $3.5 million on conditioning. And very often it's not a case of how much or what percentage of budget, but how much more can we find, right? As much as possible. And we'll always find a bit more for conditioning. Interestingly, in between those two is who's in my playing group, like you mentioned, Jeff, who am I going to play with? Because that's key. I'm spending time doing what I love. I want to do with good people. And then very close to that again is pace and flow of play, 74%. What's interesting here is a very recent survey of the NGCOA, that's the National Golf Course Owner Association, found this also ranking top 3, and 84% of operators and owners have said pace and flow play is key. They feel that's key to the play experience. And the top ranking factor here was, no surprise, 95% of owners also voted conditioning. Really important. And what came in between here was creating a welcoming environment for women. So those are key industry priorities. And no surprises here, obviously, Jeff. And as far as those two critical factors, plus what you mentioned, who's in my group, goes, how does that influence how you design the player journey and the player experience at Bandon? Maybe just briefly before we get into the meat.
Yeah, one of the benefits we have is, being a rural destination and destination golf, is we know people aren't coming here to, talk to Jeff Simonds. They're not coming here to, stay in our rooms. They're not coming because the food is, 5-star. They're coming here because they want to play golf. And everything else we do is in support of that golf experience. The rooms are awesome. They're comfortable. Everything you need. The food is geared towards, if you're playing 36 holes a day, it's, you feel good about eating it. It's going to keep you nourished. So, we know right away that everything's about the golf experience, and everything we do, we make sure it enhances the golf experience. And if it doesn't help the golf experience, we're not going to waste time doing it. So, really we kind of focus on core golfers and the golf experience, and it trickles down through everything.
For sure. And maybe just for those of us who haven't been to Bandon, I know some of my colleagues have, and I'm incredibly envious. I haven't. How many holes would you expect a regular guest to play over the course of, how long do they stay? 2-3 days? Is it 54? Is it more? How much golf can I get out of a trip to Bandon?
Typical stays sometimes somewhere between 3 and 4 days. And, there's a little bit of change right now with that how many rounds of golf play, but typically groups will come in, they'll play 18 holes when they arrive, they'll play 36, they'll have a day where they'll play 31 holes, that's playing our short golf course, and then they play 18 and then they'll leave, or they'll have another day at 36. So when people come out here, it's to play golf, and they're moving nonstop. Kind of tough right now, we're in our winter months to where you're really only getting in 18 holes, or maybe 18 holes in a par 3. So it's a little bit slower paced experience right now as far as maximizing your golf, but you can play golf here year round. It's fantastic.
That sounds like a tremendous trip for sure. So I'm glad to hear that you're adding another course in the future, so we can all add another day.
Exactly.
Yeah, here's some more research that I think is worth looking at that was done by the USGA with the University of Wisconsin Start. So the lady here on stage is Professor Christina Skunova. She is from University of Wisconsin, but also is the Director of Golf Operations at Erin Hills, another wonderful golf destination, and the US Open hosts 2017. So what they found is that there are 1,000 touch points in a golf experience. That obviously sounds crazy, but if you think about it, and I want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier, Jeff, if you think about the engage part, that's, hey, I'm going to go play around at Bandon. Let me see, when can I book? I'm sure you guys are booked up a year in advance, but I want to go. Then eventually I arrive, fantastic, drive through the gate. This is obviously way up from your day-to-day golf experience, but it's no different than if I book a tee time quickly for the course down the road, $45, and then I go arrive, drive through the gate, play my round. Every single thing is a touch point, including whatever I do at the halfway experience with a starter. Exit is restaurant, and extend is the club saying thanks for having played with us, we'd love to have you back, and then we start engage again. But what I wanted to pick up, Jeff, is that you said everything revolves on golf, and that is why this illustration here puts so much emphasis on golf, because without that, and you mentioned that you wouldn't be pulling people to your neck of Oregon, no matter how fantastic your restaurant and the views are and the people are. It's about the golf, right? And I think we have to remember that it's exactly the same at any golf course. That's why people come. Would you, what is your sense on that? And because the original illustration here had everything in the same size, and we thought, actually, wait, this is where we spend 4.5 hours, or in your case, 4 hours times 2 if you play 36 holes. That's where our time goes. That's where our commitment is. That's what the experience that we want. What is your sense on that, just in terms of really highlighting that golfer focus, and golfing focus rather?
Well, certainly agree with what the team at Stout found in agreement, whether it's 1,000 or 2,000 or 700. There's certainly a lot of different touch points, and again, from a Bandon Dunes perspective, we take a look at that from what does our website look like, because people are going to do a little bit of research before they get here. How does our reservations team handle the calls and the booking process? Because that's really kind of the first impression with a staff member. Then there's the travel piece and the arrival piece, like you mentioned. Golf over the course of the visit is the most time that they spend kind of doing the recreation that all this planning and all this travel has led up to. So that's really where probably the heaviest grade is going to happen on whether or not the trip was a success. But same thing with the exit. It's all about the checkout and the other experiences they have. And the extend for us is it's that follow-up email, the survey, the closing the loop to make sure that they had a great time. And we do a lot with Net Promoter Score and NPS, so it's finding out what are the customers' beliefs and happened, and based off of that we can deduce whether or not they're going to come back, whether they're going to tell a friend, whether it's going to be a positive experience, a negative experience. We track the social engagement. So, you got all these different factors, and that's basically just taking us around and around in that loop of, our guests are engaging, arriving, golfing, exiting, extending, and they do it continuously throughout really the last 22 years. So some of them do it annually, some of them do it once every 5 years, some are just getting ready to start doing it, and we try and get them on that loop.
Yeah, no, you're certainly putting in the design, like we said, but you're engineering success here for repeat visits, right? And you mentioned Net Promoter Score, which we'll go in just a minute. But just to quickly look at some of those research results from the USGA here, what they found is some very polar results in terms of what frustrates players and what delights them. Because not everything's created equal out of that sort of experience loop that we're creating. So the things that are the most frustrating to golfers is corrective pace of play actions. That's the overall worst score. And I would imagine that's the marshal coming over, grunting, hey, you're slow, like get on with it. So that players absolutely cannot stand. And at the same time, other people's speed, if other people are too slow, we're perceiving them as being too slow, we're having to wait, that's almost as frustrating. And on the other end, positive ranger or marshal etiquette is a top score and a delighter. And I think that's because it's just so unusual and unexpected almost. Obviously, conditioning ranks high and so on. But it's really quite a thing to see how polar this is, and that pace and flow of play and how it's managed has such a big impact on the experience. You're not, are you surprised to see it being so polar? Obviously, you put special effort into all of these items, but is that a surprise to you to see it like mapped out like this?
Not necessarily. Again, it's kind of interesting to see it, and you start, first thing I did was start to go back to my own golf interactions. And, I can think of times where I've had positive experiences with an on-course staff member, and those other times where you're struggling on the golf course. And, playing around a golf is like Christmas morning sometimes. And when it doesn't go the way you've built it up and expected it, the negative really kind of creeps in and bubbles up. And when something positive happens, it really kind of changes your perspective, and everything's all right, or it enhances the experience. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a make or break, right? Some things are make or break, whereas others are just neutral. So I think it's important to pay attention to that and really be led by what the customer wants, what the golfers want, what the members want. So this is a reminder that we need to do this particular topic really well. And you and the team at Bandon Dunes are using technology to work excellence into your player experience over and above everything else that you do really well. Maybe let's jump in to how the technology works for you guys. Give us a quick intro into the tech that you use here, the tag marshal system, and a sort of an idea who's plugged into it and how you make use of it, just high level before we dig into some of the detail.
Sure. So pace of play has been important to us since 1999. And, prior to us using tag marshal, I think it was 2017 when we started, 2017 or 2018. But we used to have our on-course staff and our starters keep track of pace of play with pencil and paper, and printed out tee sheets, and we were trying to collect as much data as we could. And a lot of it was a guessing game. And when we made the switch over to tag marshal, we used the classic tags, which are in that image there, that are simply either a caddy will carry it, we'll clip it onto a pull cart or a guest bag, and essentially we just let the classic tag track that data for us, and we sit back and watch it happen in real time. And it's allowed us to better deploy our resources and our staff to the trouble areas that we have, and also at the same time take a lot of the guesswork out, to where instead of inadvertently creating that negative on-course experience by maybe talking to a group that is actually being held up and accusing them of the slow play because we didn't quite have the exact data, that instantly creates that negative experience. And now we're upset and might be on the 5th or 6th hole, and it's going to take a couple holes for that to kind of wear off. We certainly, I won't say we don't ever have those anymore, but they're really few and far between to where we get it wrong with which group is affecting pace of play. And then we can also get to the other groups that are held up and update them quicker and make sure that they know that we're working on the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a nice introduction to it. And we'll look at what that looks like for your team just now. Maybe because obviously not every club out there uses caddies or does walking golf. So in this case, we've got a GPS screen that's super bright. I think it's as bright as an iPhone 13 Pro that goes into the cart, or we also have a classic tracker that just tracks the cart movement. And it's really just about tracking play movement and making sense of what's happening out on the course, much like a Google Maps or Waze would do. And then we also provide backend data that helps make better decisions and really also track performance over time. So that's we're gonna look at that in just a minute. So here's one of your courses. Which one is it? You obviously know this back of your hand.
Yeah, that's Bandon Dunes.
The one.
Exactly.
So we have simulated a full field here on Bandon. I hope it's somewhat logical. And maybe just to show how intuitive or easy it is for your team now to see what's going on instead of going out there looking for issues. So what are the things that your team would look out for when they look at a live map like this?
Yeah, so a couple things there is, inside our golf shops, we'll have the tag marshal map pulled up in one of our terminals. It's either on the front, or if we're doing something else, it'll be kind of off to the side. So we're tracking it, watching it inside the golf shop, and then our on-course staff, 1 to 2 team members will have a tablet with them where they're watching as well. Everyone has access to pull it up on their smartphone if they want. I've got 5 different links on my phone where I can pull it up at any time, and it's fun to just kind of peek in and see what's happening on the golf course. But essentially what we're looking at here is every green dot number that you see is that's a group that is on pace to the time par that we've established. The kind of the first things that stand out is that big pink dot on number 17, that's a slow group, so you can click on that and that creates that sidebar that popped up on the right. And we know that group is holding up play. We can also look and see tag 18 and 19 that they're being held up. They're not necessarily slow because it's their own fault. They're being held up. And essentially, right now we need to go talk to that group on number 5, and then we need to look at the group that's tag number 13, which is on the 9th tee. And then over on the back 9, tag number 6 is starting to fall behind. Not an egregious fall behind because it's a little smaller dot, but it's something that we're going to be paying attention to, especially in the next 5 to 7 minutes, to see if it gets worse or gets better.
Yeah, nicely explained. I know that's second nature to your team at this point. So the system calculates, there's a number of algorithms that run and some machine learning as well. What is the biggest risk? Because if the train stops out there, it stops, right? And you cannot get that time back. And it's really tricky to try and rescue a situation. And good on you for paying so much attention to it, because as we've established, it's a huge experience factor, but also you have tight timelines getting everyone around if they do want to play 36 holes and obviously enjoy your amenities as well. One of the things that's an important factor is, like Jeff said, how many other groups are impacted already. How early on in the round is this happening? Because somebody's falling out of position a bit later on the 18th, they're not going to do much more damage. And then we can see how did the holes go prior to that. And you have all this information at your fingertips without having to guess or pen and paper or radio somebody. Did you check in on this group earlier? How did they go? And I think one of the things that you guys do really well is that you're adding notes for every interaction. And what have you found? How have you found that beneficial?
Well, really, it's just the communication between staff members, and on any given day, we have anywhere from 2 to 4 different on-course attendance team members out working with pace of play, but there's communication that goes back and forth to the golf shops. And if a group is talked to, or whatever kind of thing that needs to be communicated, we can drop it in Tag Marshall's platform, and anyone can open it up and see it and see when the note was made. Again, it just makes it easier as we go back and communicate with people and try to make sure that we're enforcing pace of play, we're keeping the golf course moving, we're doing it in the most professional and service-oriented way possible with facts rather than guessing work. And then the other thing that's really helpful is, again, from time to time, we'll have someone that might fill out an after visit survey, and they'll, whether they might say, hey, it was a 4-hour and 50-minute pace and XYZ happened. Those notes stay with that tee time. So we can go back and say, well, either it was or it wasn't, or this happened. We did have a ranger that talked to you on this hole. Again, all in a professional, courteous way, but it gives us the ability to know that they didn't slip through the cracks, or they weren't missed, that we did make sure that we provided as much information as we could on the experience in real time to make sure that we were doing everything we could.
And maybe one item to note is that, and we spoke about this earlier, that corrective pace of play action. Well, you have to do it, right? Because you have a responsibility towards everyone, but it's how you do it.
Right.
And I think one of the key items is to not tell players you're slow, but package in a different way, position it in a different way. What are some of the sort of standard phrases that your team might use that the players can work with without feeling under pressure, under threat?
Yeah, again, playing golf out here can be a different experience for people if they've never experienced links golf, or sometimes people get stuck by the beauty of it and they're taking photos out there and they forget to play golf. So there's a number of different things. And the simplest thing we'll do is we'll ask groups to play ready golf, and we'll try and help out. If they don't have caddies, sometimes our ranger will walk with them and help break bunkers, or for caddy a little bit to try and watch balls in landing areas, basically offering their services to try and help that group improve their pace of play. If we talk to them or work with them a little bit, it'll go all the way to where we'll move a group and have them skip a hole to make sure that they get back into position, because it is important to us and every group playing that they all have an equal opportunity to enjoy the Bandon Dunes experience the way we advertise and sell it. So again, in this scenario that we're seeing here, if that group that's tag number 17 continues to be slow, they would get talked to again by the 8th hole. And if they're not picking up pace, we might have them skip the 10th hole and just go straight to 11. And that would speed them up that 15 minutes. Again, not trying to ruin their day, but ultimately inviting them out to play the 10th hole later on that day, or when they've completed their round, and it's not displacing other golfers and causing a negative impact on that experience. The thing that's tough is, what we hear often is, I'm paying X amount of dollars. And, we certainly understand that it's, some people are saving up for a long time to come here, that there is a price that they're paying, but so is every group that's here. So we're trying to make sure that everyone can live up to that experience.
I think there's one important keyword that you mentioned here, that's getting a group back in position, right? You want them at a certain position that might be 400 yards ahead or 5 minutes ahead, what have you. And this is actually a great way of communicating to the group, hey guys, you're a bit out of position, because then I don't have to say, hey, you're a bit slow right now, which we know that they get defensive about. So if it's about being out of position, great, we can cope, we can catch up. And maybe just a note here on our automated systems with the screen. Well, that's what the screen says to the player, right? The screen then automatically updates the player on where they are in terms of where they're supposed to be, so they can self-manage a bit better. And obviously that helps save resourcing. And I mean, not everyone has the benefit of having multiple resources out on a golf course like Bandon does. So a lot of the clubs that we work with, well, they can now manage this from the pro shop, like very resource efficient, and you go out as you need, or you send a note to the system, via system directly. But yeah, we want to talk to that Net Promoter Score question, and which is why you put so much effort on having positive on-course interactions out on a golf course. Tell us a little bit how you use the Net Promoter Score, and what are some of the sort of key aspects that you know go into it, and why is it important that you measure it?
Yeah, so Net Promoter Score is basically how likely are you to recommend your experience to a friend, or how likely are you willing to come back? Those are kind of the Net Promoter Scores. So we do that in our resort survey, and while we don't specifically ask about pace of play in the survey, because there is some wiggle room on there, we do essentially use our daily analytics from Tag Marshall, and our first 90 minutes of each day, our pace goal is 4 hours, and our ultimate goal is 4 hours and 20 minutes. But if that very first group does 4 hours and 20 minutes, you're not going to be able to achieve that goal for the day. So we start out more aggressive, and essentially it's that first 90 minutes worth of tee times have that 4 hour goal, and then we back it off to 420. But at the end of the day, when we look at our pace, any group that was on pace or better than pace, they're going to be our promoters. So they're going to enjoy their experience. They had a great time on the golf course because they were only out there for 4 hours and 20 minutes or less. They were able to get to lunch on time. They were able to get to their second round on time. They were able to change socks and shoes, or do whatever they needed to do in between rounds of golf, and weren't hurried or rushed from one spot to the next. And then any group that essentially finished plus 10 plus 20 minutes over pace, they're our passive, so it's neither great nor bad, but anything outside of that are our detractors, and so we keep track of that on a daily level at each golf course, and then we roll it up into a monthly score. And again, that's something that we kind of hold ourselves and our team accountable to from a pace of play standpoint. And it's been helpful doing that the last couple of years, because as golfers, we all know that a great round or a well-paced round is a huge part of the experience. And we talked about that on the slide before. And you can play in 4 hours waiting on the group in front of you on every hole, and it can still feel like a long day. Or you can play in 4:40 and not ever wait, and it felt like you blazed a trail. So it's kind of that combination of how long did it take, but also how was the spacing and the pace out there.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the difference between flow of play and pace of play, right? Where they need to be friends, but flow is
Right.
when you don't wait. But just to back you here, the research confirms that medium to good flow of play versus bad flow of play has a huge impact on the Net Promoter Score. So bad flow of play really destroys your Net Promoter Score, as you said, and medium to good flow makes it rise. Also, on-course staff, meeting on-course staff has a positive impact, and really just the basics, making players feel welcome, good flow of play, meeting on-course staff, that makes the Net Promoter Score fly. Also at your daily fee course, it increases the likelihood of a restaurant visit, right? If you don't do those things, then people don't stay and they don't come back, right? So it's that simple. So you've got to do these things well. Well, here's all of your courses on what the maps would look like. We want to just skip that, but maybe just a minute on some of those amazing events you've hosted, and also I believe you made use of some technology when things were tough to manage in 2020.
Yeah, real quickly, we'll kind of just hit on this. It was in 2020 for the U.S. Amateur Championship, it was a challenge to be able to keep that event happening, especially in the state and with what was going on. Ultimately, the requirement for us, the guidelines that the county and the state put on us, was we had to create a bubble. We had to do daily testing, and there were all sorts of hoops to jump through. So that really limited the size and scope of the team that we could have to enhance the U.S. Amateur experience. So only a third of the USGA staff came out. We weren't able to have any volunteers, and we had to only use a quarter of the staff that we have at Bandon Dunes. So roughly it was 125 people that could be involved in the total operation of it across 2 golf courses. So one of the great benefits that we were able to do is, the USGA, it still had to be the U.S. Amateur Championship. The one thing we didn't want to do was have a watered down version of it. It's not fair to the players that qualified. It wasn't fair to everyone that would come out and experience it. So, pace is such an important part of championship golf, to make sure that everyone has the same opportunity to play their best golf in the same kind of environment. So we were able to utilize Tag Marshal and put tags on every bag in every group. And, essentially you could have one person watching pace of play and be able to monitor that instead of having the usual, one person per hole that was timing people. So we used the technology and the analytics from Tag Marshal and could watch. And it also made it simple to where you could see if a group kind of slipped a little bit in pace, you could deploy a rules official out to that area specifically. And we were using rover rules officials instead of walking rules officials with each group. And they could get there almost kind of before they were called in or asked to have a ruling. So we really just kind of had a person that sat down and watched the screen and watched the dots move. And you can start to determine what's going on in that group just based off of either what did or didn't happen as you would anticipate it to. And it was great. Fast forward to this July when we hosted the U.S. Junior Amateur. Obviously great. There was not COVID precautions. There wasn't a bubble or anything like that. It was back to the championship proper. But the experience we had with Tag Marshal and using it for pace and guessing what was going to happen was so well received in 2020 that we did it again for 2022, even though we had more resources out on the golf course. And again, it just helps the overall experience. And, if you're a player and you're competing and, you get that afternoon tee time of the second wave, usually they're thinking it's going to be a 5.5 hour round of golf. And in twosomes or threesomes, I mean, that's just a slow death march. And it didn't get to that because we're able to actively watch every group all at once.
Yeah, that's in line with the feedback that we get from the European Tour and the tours that make use of it. It just makes their tournament operation more efficient, and obviously that's what it's for. But I think you're making a great point around the efficiency, and that if you have fewer resources, you still need to provide a great experience, and that is what the industry has been faced with the last 2 years, right? Because if golfer volume's up 20%, you don't get 20% more resources to manage this. How are you going to do it? In fact, it was tougher to get resources because it's been such a stiff labor market. So again, this is where technology is probably helpful to consider. Yeah, a nice segue here into the efficiencies question, and maybe taking a bit of a dig into some of the data that you track. What gets measured gets managed, and if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. I know you measure everything that you can, including the net promoter score, and for good reason, because that's the only way to get better. So here's one of those dashboards that I think is Pacific Dunes, and it really shows what Jeff has described, where here in this big bar, you have every single tee time and how it played. It shows the blue line is the goal time that's set, and that is set to 4 hours early, and then a couple of tee times in, it starts to stagger up. There's some courses that do that in even more extreme ways, and they've got multiple staggers. But it does help just to manage things appropriately. And one of the things that you can also look at is the hole by hole stats and the breakdown of how many groups were faster by how many minutes, on pace, 10 minutes over. And you can see that on this day, which is busy, almost 200 players, I would guess, you had virtually 90% of play on pace or within 10 minutes. And you came in at 4 hours, 21, 44 seconds, where your target goal time in aggregate is 4 hours, 22. So that's really a day that works like clockwork. And what's really great to see is that you had all these interactions early on with groups, because you know to pay attention on the start of the day in particular, like you mentioned. So how do you use this sort of data when it comes to your reporting? And do you also benchmark maybe your teams against one another, or the different courses, and what's there to learn from this sort of thing?
Well, there's a lot of great learning that, you know, a group on Pacific Dunes today is going to be a group on a different golf course the next day. Mm-hmm. And we can track and communicate to our different teams that, you know, if there's a group that played slow, you know, maybe they're not in the best position. If they're going to be in an 8 a.m. tee time, we might look and see if there's a spot to move them a little bit later in the day that might allow them to play at that same pace and not hold anyone up. We're not opposed to someone playing in 440 as long as it doesn't detract from someone else's experience. So we'll work with groups to find different spots where they can do that. We can communicate with our agronomy team, and all of our superintendents and assistant superintendents have access to this, and they're looking at it first thing in the morning to see how their position is ahead of play, because the last thing they want to do is hold up groups, and the last thing we want to do is have groups run into our agronomy team as they're preparing the golf course. So that gives them visibility into what's happening in the morning, and they'll speed up if need be, or even step aside if a group's really flying. And then outside of that, we can create customer profiles, and we've got our CRM or our database. And if we have, you know, continual issues, or even we have some people that just are habitual, like they speed around the golf course, we'll make notes of that and update their files, and our reservations team can utilize that, you know, if they're asking for an early morning tee time and we know that they can't play in under 4.5 hours, we're going to withhold some of the tee times to make sure that they don't slow the golf course down. And we'll book them at 10 or after 10 a.m. tee time. Some of our larger groups, kind of same thing. If we've got a group of 24 or 36 people that historically have been slow, we'll note that and make sure that we're kind of ready to go with them and have open communication about what the expectations are, and if anything's changed, or find out what it is. And some of the really great opportunities that we've been able to impress some of our guests is occasionally we'll find someone that, you know, may have gotten injured, rolled an ankle, something like that, and they were on pace and suddenly they're now behind. We've been able to kind of catch that in real time, and either, you know, sometimes a ranger can go out there and we'll help them with their golf cart, move them around. It might be something where we'll look at, you know, providing them a temporary golf cart for the rest of their stay. Which isn't necessarily something we advertise, but pace is that important to us, and just different things that we can do to make sure that everyone's still enjoying their experience.
Yeah, I think you mentioned some great strategies here, including sometimes you need to allocate players to appropriate tee times, and that's obviously something that our private club partners do, because they really build player profiles over time, right? So they know these players we can trust with the start of the day, and these players we should rather find another appropriate slot for, and it changes the game. And there's even clubs that have really quick starts to the day. And let me just jump in here. So obviously your courses are all tough to play, and there's lots to experience and to see. So you may not have a similar profile to that. This is what your pace profile looks like at Old MacDonald, for instance, right? And you're obviously familiar with this from the reports that you get. But some courses that we work with, they would literally go and start their day and their first 5-6 tee times at a 3:30. It's something really quick, 3:15 even, and find players that are attracted to that, and then even charge a surcharge for this level of experience, because some people really want that, right? And not just first round out, but the first 5 out. And then on the contrary, you might then, like you said, if there's a beginner group, how can we give them space so that they don't feel intimidated? And maybe they need to play the course in 440, and maybe we need to give them a bit more space. Where in the day can we allocate that and make it attractive to them so that they don't get in everybody else's way? So that just gives you data and information so that you can really design things better. Maybe just looking at some of the successes here at Pacific Dunes. You had a 19% increase in groups tracked over time, obviously, much like the rest of the industry would have seen that too. Your dashboard views have gone up. Your marshal notes or your notes out on the course have gone up tremendously. That's because you're paying so much attention to things. But as a result now, your number of delayers is down by 51%. So you're really catching these delaying groups and correcting things so that everybody else, including that group, can come through in a great time. And a 51% improvement on something that was already going well, right? You already put effort in, but that shows you that over time, that incremental improvement and really tweaking things and getting better and better and better, that's a testament to that. I need to keep us on pace here. Jeff, that's my job. Really appreciate the fantastic insights that you're sharing. We do only have, I think, 2 or 3 more slides to look at. And one of them is, this is a track map. So just because it's interesting, every single round that gets played on Bandon has this as a history archive sort of track map almost. So it's available, interactions are logged. You can see where and when did a group end, how did each hole go, all of those things. And like you mentioned earlier, sometimes that's useful to have. But maybe just to finish up, how does this effort that you're putting in impact your revenue line? Is it worth doing that for you?
Yeah, the ultimate goal for us is to get golfers to return. And as we talked about earlier, the golf experience is the ultimate experience of why people are coming here. So making sure that their round of golf is enjoyable, it's fun, it checks all their boxes, make sure that they come back. And it's our golf, the destination golf, that drives all of our other areas of the business, whether it's rooms, food and beverage, retail, all that is derived based off of how many players we have coming to play. So we don't necessarily look at this as something that is, if we can improve our pace of play by 2 minutes, we can squeeze another group out there. It's all about the experience. And if we take care of the experience, everything else falls into place.
Sorry, I think you would see that measuring your Net Promoter Score, that all those customer journey points that you are looking to get better on, excelling on, have an impact on that. And it's known, and there's lots of research that shows that a high Net Promoter Score is really good for business. There's one daily fee data point that I think is a significant revenue opportunity and service opportunity, and that is that 55% of first-time visitors in daily fee operations do not return. So 55% of the people that we're advertising to, marketing to, some are grabbing their attention to come play with us. They don't come back a second, third, fifth time. So there's huge repeat play potential in that, which obviously from a lifetime value point of view is significant, versus a single visit is a lost opportunity. And I think that's where there's so much to learn from how you do things, obviously at a fantastic level of excellence, but ultimately building this return culture, right? And somebody coming as a foursome, they will come back eventually with 12 people, and they will come back for 10 years or forever long. And then you're building another course, another reason to come back, right? So I think that is a fantastic business success story in itself. And the fact that you keep expanding means that it seems to work. I see, Denise, that you have snuck in our code word now, and you have also shared the survey. So you would have all seen this. If you have any questions at this point, let me just jump. You can maybe shoot them through, and Jeff or myself will try and answer as best we can. And while we're here, let me introduce Joey Walters, who's our GM over in Atlanta, and Michael Glanville, who looks after Oregon and the Northwest for us. I believe both have been to Bandon, and Joey even played a rainy round and loved it, absolutely loved it. Are there questions? Questions for Jeff. Do your superintendents use the system? How are they plugged in? I think you mentioned that they're looking at the live map so they can see where the players are. But you're not tracking machinery at this point, right?
We are not tracking machinery at this point. Every once in a while, we'll look at the heat maps that are provided and can zero in on certain areas. We're fortunate that we've got so much space out here as far as size of the golf course that we don't really get a lot of hot spots or high traffic areas that become trouble issues for us. But it is certainly another benefit to having the system, is you can see where people are moving, and if you need to deviate or change the route people are taking, you can do that.
Yeah, that's much less of an issue with walking golf, but in cart golf, it compacts very quickly and it compounds very quickly. So that's where geofencing is helpful. I don't see any other questions. And we are bang on time, like we promised. Anything else from your side, Denise? You're happy? Everyone's seen the code word? And you have your link. Please get your points. Okay, Jeff, maybe a quick minute on the future at Bandon. You get to host a few more events, don't you? What's up in the next few years?
Yeah, the next up for us from a major tournament is the 2025 U.S. Women's Amateur Championship. And then in 2028, we've got the Walker Cup. So we've got a couple years before we get back to it, but we're excited to get back in the championship amateur golf.
Fantastic. Now we're looking forward to seeing Bandon on the big screen. There's a Q&A question. Oh, okay. That's a question for you, Denise. People are asking for the code word and the survey link. Maybe we'll just post it in the Q&A.
Yeah, because it's in, excuse me, it's in the chat.
Yeah.
So
I'll copy it over.
okay. Let's see if I can.
Okay, done.
If I can do this here real quick. Give me a second, everybody. Let me see if I can put it into an area that might be easier for you. No pressure here.
I've answered both, but they do go to the answered question
Okay, let me.
when it's done. Anyway.
Sorry, everybody. I'm copying and pasting it.
The points are gold, aren't they?
They are. They're pure gold.
Mining. So I think you need to give Jeff his points for sure. Maybe double bonus points.
Let's see. I'm going to draw. Let me try to type it in the very first question we had there, or I'll type it under Dominic's. Yes, because it is in the chat bar already.
Yeah.
So let's try this. Give me a thumbs up, someone, if you see it. Oh, you have it too. Okay. Does that work? Yeah. Twice the links, twice the code words.
I think we're
Dominic,
good.
thumbs up, you got it?
Hosts and panelists, everyone. Okay, got it. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic chatting to you, and thank you for all the insights. Super interesting and lots of learnings, no doubt. So if anyone has any questions, I'm sure that Denise can connect. You can certainly reach out to us. I'm not giving you carte blanche to pester Jeff, and certainly don't ask him for a round of golf at Bandon. You have to wait in line. How long are you booked up for? Into midnight?
We're into 2024, but
okay.
There's a lot of people that are in here that have tee times coming up here soon. So
Yes,
no.
oh yes.
Of course.
They're all yours.
yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you, gentlemen, and Natalie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Bodo.
Thanks, everyone. Fantastic session. Take care. Have a good day.